Hey, what's going on, guys? Aaron here, and in this video I want to talk about dowel arrows, particularly ones you can get from Home Depot or Lowe's or any other DIY store such as Joann's Fabrics or whatever. Now normally most bowyers, most arrow makers, especially those who practice survival skills, learn to build their own primitive arrows using natural material found out in nature, out in the woods. River cane being one of them, dogwood, holly shaft material, sometimes even willow in short-term situations. And this is one of my heavy-duty 600 grain turkey fletching, deer sinew, river cane arrow, and it's got a steel point on it, and it's got a dogwood foreshaft. So this is something you would make for hunting. I've hunted with these before, and just recently I started building longer arrows and heavier arrows because I plan on going hog hunting sometime this next season. So anyways, when we talk about dowel arrows, you go to, like I said, a craft store, Lowe's, Home Depot, something like that. You come across long in a certain section, usually by the wood section, you'll come across dowels, and they're mostly used for home projects such as flagpoles and tomato stakes for having the tomato vine grow up around. And they do work. You know, I've used dowel arrows for quite some few years, and one of the things to note is that, you know, it depends on how much of a purist you are. You know, I don't see any issue for me going to a Home Depot and spending $10 on a batch of arrow shafts that I know I can make myself going out into the bush. But sometimes you just don't have that luxury of having the time or the material to go out and cut your own. And so you go to the craft store and you get yourself a dowel shaft. Now this is an oak shaft. There's a variety of shaft material. There's poplar, there's pine, this one's oak. There's a variety of other materials. Now for really well-tuned, high-quality arrow shaft material, you would have to go to places like Three Rivers Archery or Raptor Archery to purchase those shaft materials. Now when you build your own arrow shafts from dowel material, there's a few variables you got to keep into mind. First is grain runoff. Now let me see if I can find it. You probably can't see it, but this was a poorly chosen shaft. I didn't have much time in Home Depot. When you have grain runoff, you'll see the growth ring be exposed on the side of the shaft. This makes for a less durable arrow, because unlike straight sheaf shafts, which, well, this is a river cane, so it's just a cane, you have circular growth rings. When you cut that small arrow shoot, basically it's like a small tree. And you, of course, you fire harden it or fire straighten it and stuff like that. It becomes its own durable arrow shaft. I have never had a primitive arrow made from a circular growth ring arrow shaft break. Now I've had quite a few dowel shaft materials break, and that's because they're poorly chosen. You want the grain running perfectly straight. You don't want any. You'll see it, the growth rings, almost like they look like little waves coming off the shaft. That basically means that this shaft is more likely to break, especially coming out of a 50 or 60 pound bow. Now, one thing I've already started on here after sanding a little bit, and these were 5/16 dowels, so they were already basically spined for my 55 pound bow. Usually, my rule of thumb, I've never had a spine tester, but if it takes about 1.5 pounds to bend this 1.5 inches, it's about a 50 to 60 pound spine. This may be a little too less spine for me, but that's fine. I'll figure something out. I'll probably shorten the arrow. But I've already gotten some nocks situated and just used some simple steel tools, and I wrapped it with glue-soaked sinew to reinforce it. I always wrap my nocks with sinew. Of course, this adds a few extra grains of weight, but this really helps to reinforce the nock and prevent splittage, because sinew is incredibly strong, and especially when it's glue soaked, and once it's wrapped right underneath the nock for about 1 inch, you prevent splitting. So one thing to note too is, I'm not sure if this wood is treated, but most Home Depot woods are treated with some sort of chemical material. And this is kiln dried wood, so the moisture content is probably about 4% in these shafts. I like mine a little bit higher than that. I like them about 5 or 6%. You know, you do notice a little bit more warping with shafts that are a little bit more green, at least from what I've seen. but for the most part, they stay relatively straight. This one's not been straightened. So these dowel shafts come 95% straight. You just gotta do a little bit of heat treating over a stove or over a bed of coals to get them relatively straight. So I recommend for anyone who's looking to get quick arrows that you take your time, spend 30 minutes looking for shafts. Make sure you get really straight grained ones. When you cut your nock, don't go parallel with the grain, because that's almost like splitting it in half. You want to go across the grain to ensure that the arrow is as durable as possible. Because if you're taking these deer hunting or hog hunting, you want them to be able to impact bone, impact muscle tissue, and if you miss, you want to save that arrow. You want to do as minimum repairs as possible to this arrow shaft. I do have a batch of woods that I collect some holly and dogwood from, but I haven't had much time due to work, so I haven't been able to get out and collect any of that stuff. And river cane for me is a rarity. If you're watching, John, and also Ben, I'm gonna be sending you guys some river cane sometime this year, probably midsummer. I'll cut some cane down and send you guys about 2 dozen shafts apiece, and I'll hand select them very carefully. But anyways, that's just what I want to talk about. You know, I figured I'd make a little video since I'm working on some DIY dowel shaft arrow shafts, and I honestly don't hope for the best. I hope for the best, but I don't expect much from these shaft material. Of course, they're, you know, $1 a piece, and I chose oak specifically for its heaviness and durability. You know, with poplar and especially pine, there's less of a durability factor. Like I said, I plan on taking these hog hunting, so if I come across a hog with a shield, a very thick shield, you know, I want this arrow to be extremely durable. I want to be able to penetrate that shield if I can, which I have a feeling I'll only be able to be doing that with these Stephen Steel trade points. Once they're honed to a razor sharp edge, they'll penetrate that no problem, coming out of my 55-pound bow. I've got some good news though, and bad news. One of my customers that I sold a bow to, one of my really good Sudbury bows, shorter version of course, because he was a shorter guy. Originally I sold the bow to his girlfriend to give to him for Christmas, and I won't disclose too much, but there was some sort of issue going on between them, and he's a welder, so he doesn't have much time to shoot. He works 12-hour shifts, so he's planning on giving me that bow back. So it'd be exciting to get it back. I might reimburse her depending on, well, she already told me she didn't really care, but gave them a good discount too on the bow. But you'll see it, it's the wooden bow with a white brain tan buckskin grip. You'll see it in one of my videos titled Primitive Archery, and it's a nice bow. I can't wait to shoot it. I might take Old Ugly, my longbow that I built, I might take that hog hunting, or I might take the shorter Sudbury bow hog hunting. But the only issue being that I pull 28-inch draw length with my anchor point, and that shorter bow only has about 26-inch draw length. For me, that's a floating anchor, or when I pull back that arrow to full draw, I'll have to kind of lean in a little bit versus having a nice smooth draw to my cheek. So that would just mean me practicing with a different shooting style to get proficient. But anyways, guys, it's late. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning here. I just finished sizing these dowel shafts up, and I've got one set of nock in this dowel shaft. But I'm gonna hit the hay, and you guys have a good morning, actually. So take care.